In this video, we're going to be talking about the Harvest heat pump system and the Sanco2 heat pump water heater. They actually tie in conjunction to form a heat pump system that not only heats your home, but also heats your domestic hot water. And we're going to be answering the question, is this the most eco-friendly system on the planet? Or are there a few downfalls that we need to watch out for when we look at this system? Now, if you're tuning into the channel for the first time, you'll know that we cover a lot of different types of heat pump technologies on this channel. And one of the things we've recently talked about is the refrigerant phase out that's happening nationwide throughout the United States. This is the phase out of R410A refrigerant and replacing it with the new refrigerants, which is R32 as well as R454B. Now, we've talked about some of the implications of this and whether or not there are some actual benefits. These newer refrigerants are more efficient, but the spoiler alert that we've kind of alluded to is that a lot of this, although there is some efficiency gains with these newer refrigerants, is what I would call planned obsolescence, meaning that this is basically a moneymaker. And one of the things that's very unique about this product is that the Sanco2 water heater, or the Sanco2 heat pump, which is an air to water heat pump, which is how it provides heating for your home, uses a very eco-friendly refrigerant because it actually uses CO2. Now, we're gonna talk about why CO2 or carbon dioxide is not a widely used refrigerant or what some of its limitations are, because the truth is although this system in theory could replace a lot of systems, the truth is that CO2 has one major pitfall, and that is that because of the pressures that it operates at very high pressures, temperatures when it's running, it's not something that can be used as a drop-in replacement for a typical system, and these systems are not field serviceable in terms of the coil. So that's why all of the CO2 systems out there are typically monoblock designs. You're not gonna have a split system design like you do now, where you run a refrigerant line from the outdoor unit to the indoor unit. Now, in the case of Sanco2 and how these systems work to heat your home, they typically work on a forced air hydronics basis, which is how the heat pump water heater heats your home. Is basically it runs hot water through a coil, and that provides forced air heat to your home instead of using a furnace, or instead of using a refrigerant coil like you might be used to using if you're using a traditional heat pump coil or a traditional heat pump like any of the other heat pumps on the market that have refrigerant lines running from the condenser outside to the indoor unit. So that's just one downside to CO2. But another thing that people might not realize is that CO2 systems are actually heat only by design, because carbon dioxide as a refrigerant is not very efficient for air conditioning or for cooling in the refrigeration cycle. So the Sanco2 heat pump water heater is actually a single direction heat pump. So it doesn't have a reversing valve to function for both heating and cooling, because it only really functions efficiently from a heating perspective. So for heating capabilities, this system is hands down one of the most efficient systems on the market. For an air source heat pump to have COP, or coefficient of performance numbers that are as high as 5 or 6, mean that this system is extremely efficient when it comes to heating water and heating your home. But when it comes to air conditioning, it's just not going to work, which means that you're going to have to incorporate another system to handle the air conditioning for your home. Now, I don't want you to think that this video is all doom and gloom. We are going to talk about some of the other reasons that this heat pump is actually a viable option. In fact, I'm a big fan of this heat pump, and I think it's a great option for a lot of climates and a lot of specific applications, which we'll talk about on this channel and other videos, because this video is actually part of a series of videos on the Harvest heat pump system and the Sanco2 heat pump, or water heater, or however you want to call it. It's technically just an air to water heat pump, and so how you use that heat is up to you. You can either use it for domestic hot water, or you can also incorporate it into a forced air hydronic system to heat your home. But the bottom line is this system is viable, but it does have a few caveats that we wanted to touch on in this video. Now, the Harvest heat pump system in particular is unique in the fact that it's not just a heat pump that produces heat for your home on an on-demand basis, but it also stores heat. And so when it pairs with the Sanco2 water heater and the glass-lined tank, the system actually has a feature called stratification, which means that the water in the tank is stratified from a hot layer as well as a cold layer. So it can provide domestic hot water for your home, but also this is how it functions as a battery to store energy in the form of heat. So a traditional battery system is electrochemical. Now, one of the reasons this is more eco-friendly than a traditional battery system is that a battery system, for example, if you get a Powerwall or some similar sort of battery setup, that is going to be a little still less eco-friendly because technically you have to use a lot of raw materials to make that battery. Now, this still requires raw materials to make. The tank is still made out of steel. There's still copper. So one could argue that this is a little bit different or less eco-friendly because you have a bigger tank taking up more space than a battery. But if you look at the numbers, I don't really know which is worse in terms of is there more recycled copper or steel used in the tank versus lithium deposits that have to be harvested for a regular battery by comparison with this type of system, which functions as some sort of smart thermal battery system. But the way that the system works is it stores that hot water and it stores it in excess of what you need at any given moment. So that way, when you take a bath or when there's a call for heating in the home, you have plenty of hot water stored, and that hot water is stored as a battery. And this heat pump is very eco-friendly and able to operate on a continual basis, basically throughout the day, to replenish the hot water in that tank. And if you happen to live in a very cold climate, you will often incorporate some sort of backup heat, not because the system can't keep up in colder climates, but just because the load actually becomes exponentially higher as the temperature outside gets colder and colder. And so that's just to augment or supplement some of the heating on those colder days. Now, one of the reasons this is a little bit more environmentally friendly is that you have less degradation. If you look at the amount of degradation that occurs with a typical discharge and charging cycle in a whole home battery backup, for example, when comparing it to an electric vehicle, they say that on average, after about 100,000 miles, you'll have anywhere between 5 and 10% of battery degradation where the battery can break down. And although I've heard different numbers depending on which sources you've looked at, so battery degradation isn't as bad as some claim, but it definitely exists. With this, you don't technically have battery degradation because your tank is not going through an electrochemical process to store energy, because it's not storing electricity, it's storing energy in the form of heat that you use to heat your home. So in summary, the system is very eco-friendly, it's very efficient, and although it does have a few caveats like not being able to do air conditioning on its own, I still think it's an excellent system for this market. And the fact that this system can also double as a battery when it's paired with the Harvest smart thermal battery system makes this a very unique and revolutionary product that I definitely think is going to disrupt the marketplace. Now, there's a few more specifications I want to touch on now, but before we do that, if you haven't done so already, please smash the like button for the algorithm and consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't done so already. We put out daily and weekly content on how you can get the best HVAC for your home, and also talk about new products like this as they come to market or as I'm made aware of them. So if you enjoyed this video and find it helpful, smashing the like button and subscribing to the channel is a free and easy way that you can show your support and help us grow and continue to put out content like this. Now, one of the specs that I absolutely love about this heat pump is the decibel rating. When it comes to comfort, one of the biggest comfort factors that most homeowners report when they're reporting on the features that their current system is lacking is that their current system might be noisy or loud. And this system, the outdoor unit, runs as low as 38 decibels when it first kicks on. So it's right up there with all the other inverter compressors. It's one of the quietest systems on the market. And as a result, that means it's not going to impact your outdoor living, which is not as big of a deal in the winter because most people aren't outside by their heat pump when their heat pump is running in the winter. But oftentimes, especially in cities and areas where you might have a smaller backyard, when you're spending time outside, if you have a loud, noisy air conditioner, when your system kicks on, because even though the system does not do air conditioning, it's still going to heat your hot water in the summer. And so remember that this system will be running in the summer, but on a much more limited basis because the load is much smaller since it's just being used for domestic hot water production. But that doesn't change the fact that having a quiet system is very nice and makes the system much more desirable from a comfort perspective as well, which is something I always look at. Now, I did mention earlier some of the COPs on this particular unit can get above 5. Now, that's going to be on warmer days. If you're not familiar with what a COP is, COP stands for coefficient of performance. And the way that it works is it's the amount of electricity. The formula is basically how many watts of heat are generated from 1 watt of electricity. And the reason that's relevant is because anytime you're using an electric resistive heat or electric space heat, for example, like you would get from a space heater, 1 watt of electricity consumed produces 1 watt of heat. That's the simple formula because you're using electric resistive heat. But with a heat pump, you're able to get a higher coefficient of performance. So when you have a coefficient of performance of 5, that means that the system is literally 5 times more efficient than running a space heater or any sort of electric resistive backup heat. And for comparison, a lot of heat pumps in the market will operate somewhere between the 2 and 3 range, depending on the outdoor ambient conditions. And the same is true for this at the colder temperatures for sure, but all along the continuum or the spectrum of temperatures, this is definitely a little bit more efficient than a lot of its inverter counterparts. So it's a very efficient system. I believe the average COP, if I'm not mistaken, was rated at 3.8 for most conditions that we'll see in terms of average lows in the winter. And so if your average low is somewhere between 10 and 20 degrees, this system is going to be able to average a COP that's over 3 most of the time, because those lows, remember, those are the lowest temperatures. And the way that this system runs is actually not just by running on an on-demand basis, but it's actually running during the day, during the warmest parts of the day, because that's when the system is most efficient. And therefore it's able to store some of that heat energy for use later in that tank. So that way, when you use it, you have that heat ready to go. And normally when you're gonna need that stored heat energy is going to be in the middle of the night or some of the colder parts of the day. So it's an interesting way that this system is able to trade efficiency and harvest that energy, which is where the clever title of the smart thermal Harvest pod came into place. That Harvest pod harvests the energy during the day while the heat pump is operating and stores it for use later on. And the benefit of doing this is that it's using energy when emissions are lowest, when the prices on the grid are the cheapest, and when the demand on the grid is the cheapest, at least in the winter months, which is from the morning to mid-afternoon before people get home. And so for these reasons, I do think this is one of the most efficient heat pumps on the market and truly a remarkable system. Now, if you're interested in this particular product, there's actually a link in the description below where we can connect you with a contractor in your area. This is being rolled out across the nation in limited markets right now. So if you're anywhere along the West Coast, it's being rolled out. They're also starting to roll it out in Colorado. So if you happen to be interested in this particular product and would like to get an estimate, there's a link below where you can request more information and see if this is a viable option for you. And also popping up on the screen shortly will be a few videos in the series related to this particular heat pump, as well as efficiency ratings and things like that that are relevant, so you can have an understanding of why this system sets itself apart. But it's truly a unique product. So if you're interested in getting in touch with a contractor or getting some more information about this product, again, there'll be a link in the description for your convenience. And check out these next videos if you haven't done so already.